Buonasera a tutti in Italia, and welcome to all, wherever you may be in the world, to this evening's SDA Insight Live. I'm Hans Breckbiel, Associate Professor of Practice at SDA Bocconi, and also fortunate to be the Director of the Digital Strategies Roundtable and the Corporate Information Security Roundtable. And I'm joined this evening by Christian Borst from Richemont, Robert McIntyre from Tetra Pak, and Jeffrey Moore from Corvus Insurance. And they are all CISOs, despite what their titles may say. They always vary a bit. And I'm happy to say that all three are part of our Corporate Information Security Roundtable, and even happier to say that they're all my friends as well. So I would ask each of you, if you would, maybe starting with Christian, if you would introduce yourself briefly so people have some idea who you are and what your background is, and then Robert and then Jeff.
Thank you, Hans. Yeah, also from me, good evening, good afternoon for everyone. So as Hans said, I'm Christian Borst. I'm responsible for the digital side of security in our corporate security function in the Richemont Group. The Richemont Group is one of the leading luxury groups in the world. And in this context, I'm looking globally after any cyber threats related to our supply chain, starting from the production of the goods all the way down to the customer with traditional brick and mortar retail, as well as online and e-commerce. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Christian. Hans. Robert McIntyre. I'm the Director of Information Security for Tetra Pak and Information Security Officer for the group. That basically covers the whole Tetra Pak group worldwide and all the countries we operate, covering both internal IT security as well as OT, both internally and now externally as well. Been CISO for about 5 years and background largely in IT.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Moore, and I'm the CISO for Corvus, and I'm responsible for all the technical and compliance security for the organization. In my history, I've also done OT, space, retail, done a lot of security jobs, and I'm right now enjoying pandemic like the rest of us.
So we're going to talk a little bit tonight about the emergence of cybersecurity in general, but then also talk a little bit specifically about what the pandemic has done to change that, because it has brought some changes. So I think you all know that the field of cyber and information security has grown a lot in importance and interest in the last few years. But certainly I think the coronavirus pandemic has highlighted the need for cyber, and as some aspects of digital transformation took a big leap forward in companies, cybersecurity really moved into a spotlight. And this sudden move to remote working for so many, as well as sharply increased demand for online capabilities by both consumers and B2B customers alike, really, has accelerated what were already existing trends and really brought them into focus. I'm going to outline for you just very quickly how we think about cyber risk overall and the impact on companies before we dive into some questions that I have for our panelists, our guests tonight, and any that you may have. And of course, I'd encourage you to put them in on the chat. So Monia, if we could have the first slide, please, that'd be great. The point I want to make with this slide is simply how we in cyber think about risk. It's a combination of two things ultimately. One is what the threats out there are, what the threat landscape looks like, and what our own vulnerabilities in a company are. And those two things put together equal risk. Next slide. So to give you a short idea of what we mean by when we talk about threats and threat actors, there are a number of different actors who act in this space. Hobby hackers, certainly, and they do this because they can and for the pleasure of it, sometimes to teach a lesson, maybe to get a little attention. Hacktivists, which is the term for activists in the cyber area, and they're doing it to protest something or to damage the reputation of a company. Criminal organizations, and as you can imagine, that's mostly about money in one way, shape, form, or another. Terrorist organizations, and they're there to do exactly that, cause terror of various types. But one thing that certainly differentiates them, along with maybe the nation states a little bit, is that occasionally they use cyber to achieve physical disruption of some type or another, and that's of course increasingly possible. The next actor is nation states, our nation states, and those often come in the form of what we call advanced persistent threats, because they're the actor with the most capabilities in this. And then last but not least is corporate espionage, and usually they're looking to steal contracts or change a power balance in an industry, gain some intellectual property, etc. Next slide, please, Monia. So what's the vulnerabilities have? Well, it's really our business environment, right? And as we all know, our business environment has changed dramatically, not just the change of the last 4 months, but the change of the last 10 plus years. It's a very global world in business now. There are tremendous amounts of digital technology of various forms, starting with the consumerization of information technology, but many other forms too, Internet of Things, cloud, etc. These all bring vulnerabilities and changes which create vulnerabilities. Also, if you think about the centrality of data, how important data is in our world now. And so therefore it moves around a lot and becomes more vulnerable. And our connection to our partners and to our vendors and through platform business models. And last but not least, our relationships with people. If you think about it, our way of having employees and how work gets done and the nature of the employee-employer relationship has changed a great deal. And as new generations enter the workforce, we now have different generational attitudes to privacy and to data as well. So what once was a perimeter around a company that was easy to protect, if you will, it's something that's been shifting and disappearing, frankly. Next slide, Monia. So what is at stake for companies? And I would argue there's an awful lot at stake. And we're not just talking about direct cost of loss or remediation of a breach. There's reputation at stake. There's the ability to simply conduct business. There's partner and customer confidence. Even the ability to attract talent, not to mention fines as regulation tightens and people bring more suits about loss of data, etc. Next slide, please. So I just also want to frame for you why this is such a big issue. So according to Juniper Research, when they did it in 2015, they projected that by 2019, cybercrime would be worth $2.1 trillion. And so I ask you, whose GDP is that? And since you can't answer, or maybe don't have time to answer on the chat right now, I'll tell you, it's Italy's. Italy is the 8th largest GDP in the world, 8th largest economy in the world, and that is 2.1 trillion is the GDP of Italy in 2019. And the projected GDP or cybercrime cost in 2024 is over 5 trillion. And that's the GDP of Japan, the third largest economy in the world. So this issue matters. Last slide, please, Monia. And companies have an opportunity to respond to the risks either by mitigating them, by accepting them. And let's be clear that in business, accepting a risk is sometimes part of business. It's all about risk and reward. And this is no different than any other risk. Or transferring the risk, which nowadays happens often in insurance or whatever. But above all, it's really important to build resilience in the company. And the people that build that resilience are indeed, or that lead the building of it, are indeed the CISOs we're going to talk with this evening. So guys, if you would, just so people watching understand a touch about your industry through this, can you briefly describe what you would see as both the external business impact and the internal employee impact of the pandemic on your companies? And through that, I think they'll get a little bit about what your companies are about as well. Who wants to jump in?
So, I mean, the external business for us currently has increased, honestly, because of the pandemic and the increased attacks. They're acquiring more cyber insurance. They're acquiring more understanding of the risk that their organizations will be hitting. The internal impact to our organization is actually, having a bespoke organization. People are now all over the place. People who are all in Boston now are all around, the areas there. Luckily, we have a very much a zero trust network architecture, so it's okay in standard hardware or laptops. But a lot of my peers weren't as lucky, or a lot of the external businesses that we've been working with have not been as lucky as we have, being a more balanced organization and having to be remote. Also, this happened in the process of us moving office, so it actually made it a little bit easier. It was just like, just don't come into the office, and people just stayed home. So there was a pro and a con, but yeah, it's been impacting us, and there's a huge impact to all of the security engineers and admins out there, because there's a lot more work going on now for us because everything's increased. Last thing I heard was 900% increase in phishing attacks. We just see so many get through as well, so it's just a tiring situation.
We'll get into the cyber impact in a minute. If you guys, Robert or Christian, you want to talk just about the business impact, and then how it's affected your employees.
Sure. So if I cover Tetra Pak just for a second, because maybe you understand the package, but maybe not the full set of services or businesses in Tetra Pak. So, if we look at the macroeconomic situation for us, we have three real businesses within our company. One being processing of food. The second being services, and the third being actual packaging and the material and the packaging machines. For our processing business, for our packaging machine sales businesses, as you might expect, things have slowed down. Businesses are not so keen to make investments now in the current environment. So we've seen some negative impact there on growth and plans. For those. Services is pretty well running about normal, down on a lot of, let's say, normal proactive type of things they would do with customers, but up on emergency maintenance, because all customers are running at full blast to keep up with the additional demand. And that kind of leads into the packaging business, where we're had a bit of an uptick and a benefit, if you will, from the situation, because with stockpiling and with change in consumer behaviors and demand, we're actually seeing quite an increase in consumption of food at home and these type of situations. As well, for our employees, everyone, we were a bit maybe unique like Corvus. We had almost everyone with a laptop in our white collar population, even if it was really sort of the usual 80-20, 80% worked from the office and 20% worked from a remote location on any given day. Of course, now we are pretty much completely swapped and everyone is working from home. No travel, everyone doing everything by WebEx. It's been more adjustment to the normal impact of going into the office or traveling to see your colleagues that now we all do this right here. So that's an interesting change. We'll see how it affects everyone's behaviors and the business culture. I think it'll be interesting.
Thanks, Robert.
Yeah.
Christian.
Thanks. Yeah, I think on our side, probably to give a little bit of different angle is, we're operating in the retail sector. So obviously we do have brick and mortar stores all over the world, and I think as everyone can imagine, that's part of the business was and definitely is impacted by the different lockdowns and the different decisions in the countries. We do have e-commerce where obviously we also see the impact and the differences in the fact that people use that channel to compensate the fact that our brick and mortar retail has not the same availability. And then we're also producing. So on the blue collar side, we'll looked into the stock management, but also especially for the north of Italy, we were happy to be able to contribute in the form of producing masks and also donating the masks to the government in the regions in Italy. Which is a contribution that we could provide due to our leather business and fashion business in that context. And then for the office workers, I think that was already well covered by Rob and Jeff, and I think similar for us. For those staff, we were in the position to enable them to work from home with all the usual challenges and hiccups. However, they were quite well managed by our technology team to enable them in an almost seamless experience.
Thanks. So prior to the pandemic, just if you think about the last couple of years, what would you say in your areas the key features of the cybersecurity threat landscape were? That's another window into your company. I mean, what things do you see? What impact you of those factors that I listed? And
for myself at Tetra Pak, I think what has become apparent, and I think has seen a lot of increased both media coverage as well as obvious impact to companies and businesses, has been some of the, if you will, bystander threats with major campaigns by either nation states or large threat actors where perhaps you're not the target, but unfortunately you have the same kind of vulnerabilities and you just are unfortunately also affected. So I think that has been quite a change in the landscape prior to the pandemic. Again, Jeff mentioned, increase in business email compromise and that kind of threat. That's been steadily increasing, and as he mentioned, it's just skyrocketed once the pandemic hit. And of course, all focused on everyone's fears around the pandemic. So,
yeah. No, I actually concur with Robert. I think we're all seeing the same things right now. Some of us are just fallout from other attacks or connected to a third party that is possibly in the sights of a hacking group or a government, and we're just if we have the same vulnerabilities, we become sort of a de facto target to maybe leverage to get into the company and stuff like that. I find right now most of what I'm seeing is hugely around the especially the BEC and the phishing and phishing campaigns, just trying to get some foothold or information, and it's a constant awareness right now for us and the company.
Christian?
Yeah, it's the same here. I think as you usually see when it comes to these cyber attacks, I think the emotions of people are very relevant and very important. And I think especially in these times, we see the impact and the objective in going in this direction. The phishing campaigns, as also Jeff said, building on the need of the people to get information, to collect information, to stay informed, but also playing a little bit with the fears in different directions, driven by the response to the pandemic, be it with information around government news, be it with information related to the professional job life. All of this, of course, is being used in that context. Yeah.
So it sounds to me like for all of you, the phishing vector is still a really prominent, not the prominent vector from which attacks come. And you want to give a couple examples of how that's changed in the pandemic, or how people have taken advantage of that in the pandemic?
I think the way they've taken advantage of it is just using the pandemic. I mean, like Christian just said, everybody is interested. Over here it's like, hey, this state is opening, and look how things are going great. Somebody's going to click on it just to say maybe their state's doing something wrong to see it. And of course, the whole thing is the human is the weakest element. Help these guys here. This is a family that needs help. They've just had a child. They have no health insurance. Click. It's the tried and trusted techniques they're using, just with a different name, COVID, right? We had things around the royal wedding were also seen in England around, look at this. Here's a picture of Meghan Markle doing X. People will click on it. It's just the same tricks, just different wording. That's all.
Yeah, it's again, social engineering, as it always been, and nothing better than something like this pandemic to really get people, as Jeff said, to click anything to see what's going on, or understand the situation in the very beginning, of course, because it was such an unclear situation as far as what the risks were to you personally, etc. So it's really, for us, it is the primary vector for potential major compromise or issue to the business.
Maybe to add to this, and I think this is also where it is key to make sure that we are helping our colleagues to get the right and relevant information, that we point them at the right sources to support them and in almost fulfilling their needs to get the information, but guiding them a little bit. Because I think, Jeff, you said the weakest link. Maybe that's something I would put slightly different in terms of that. I mean, the human aspect is there, and we need to also give them the right support and the understanding that yes, every one of us, I think. I can admit myself, when you're stressed and tired, you will fall for that. So I think no one is safe from these kind of things, and that's why it's even more important, especially when it comes to a crisis situation like this, that we have a clear communication within the company, within our staff, guiding them, giving the information, and enabling them to consume it if they like. That starts with. We saw email campaigns in Japan that were mimicking the government over people that were sending emails that they have the latest COVID dashboard, down to the fact that, of course, now when it comes to the contact tracing apps, people are concerned. So people are looking at us and say, okay, what's your take on this? And it even goes that far that I hear from friends saying, well, Christian, if you're using it, I'm using it as well, because you're looking into this. So and we need to be mindful on what the people actually also project on us, and what's our responsibility in this context to give them this comfort and this information. I think that's super key, and it goes beyond
And I think
the official topics.
to put a context as well, or maybe positioning, again, as a manufacturing company, we have maybe, between internal systems, e-business, external cloud solutions, et cetera, we have maybe 1,000 points to secure.
Yeah.
Every person is a point to secure. So we have 30,000 employees and contractors we need to secure, and maybe 1,000 systems. So, and of course, then it's the human factor that, we can't just put a tool on and solve the problem. You have to make them aware, you have to educate them, because as Christian said, it's, sometimes you're tired and you're just going to click the link because you just, you weren't paying attention. You were busy, you had something
It's
to
really
do.
part of the trend, it sounds like, guys, that also from an information security professional standpoint, part of that reaching out and giving positive information and telling people what they can do and should do and so on is in a way part of a trend that I think leading people in this area started a while ago, which is to get away from being Dr. No. And just always telling everybody what they couldn't do and what they weren't allowed and so forth, which is a perception of information security, if
Yes.
you will.
I think that's actually a true point, because security has had to change over the years. We need to re-image ourselves as well to be part of the support for the business and not seen as an impact to the business. That's the reason people like everybody on this call has now, more visibility even before the pandemic to leadership, because we are people that know how to protect an organization and build resilience into the organization, but also we're people that we want to help the organization, everybody that's in the company. So we spend time with the people. We're not those over big ogre police people that people try to see us from. And if you're still running that kind of security team, people are not going to come to you and tell you problems. I've found more breaches and issues in my organization because I'm personable and my team, it works on being personable, than actually trying to yell at everybody, so it helps in a bigger picture. And we should be giving this information out, provide new links that are clear to the rest of the organization. We have a pandemic team that does COVID that actually sends out every week information, new links to new information, and it's partly from us and partly from the rest of the organization. So it's a supporting organization.
Thanks, Jeff. So one thing that I think would be interesting for people to hear, as you shifted to remote working when the pandemic hit, there were a lot of changes in the IT infrastructure, and people's behavior caused big changes for you inside. Do you want to talk a little bit just about what some of those changes were and how that relates to kind of an even further disappearance of perimeter and any sense of that, et cetera, and people working at their table at home, and just what some of the ramifications types of things were. And you mentioned at the beginning, guys, laptops being available in your cases and so on. Do people even really understand why that's so important and why that was really magic in this case?
Sure. Looking at it, there was a big push, of course, when this all happened and we all had to immediately start working from home. Then there was a lot of questions around, how do we make sure we can continue to run the business, and how can we still deliver to our customers? And, to some extent, there was very much a focus on being able for the business to function and get the job done, less on, let's say, managing risk or balancing risk. So there's been a huge push, and from the standpoint of individuals, on, really trying to, do anything they can to make sure they can get their job done. And we talked about the education awareness, and if they're not aware of what tools you have available, what solutions are available that are secure and prepared for them, then of course they're not intending to do bad. They're just trying to get their job done. So there's been a bit of an issue to keep that a little bit corralled and keep educating people on where they should do things. And with it being so distributed, Jeff mentioned earlier, the edges of the network or the edges of our environment have been dissolving for years, and now that you can pretty much say they're about gone. And it's really about how do we, at the end of the day, protect the information that is critical to our business. So I think, what we have to think about, and what the business is starting to now get a grasp on, even if we've tried to educate them for years, is that we have to move to securing our information, not just securing our systems or our people.
Couldn't have said it better.
Perfect. Yes. No, I think if you move away a little bit from the office side, where I think Rob, you fully explained this. I think the other thing we saw was enabling, especially our people in the front line, the salespeople, to still conduct the business. Where when you think about many of them, they're usually in our stores, in our boutiques. And interacting directly with the client, and how do we enable them to do this, and how do we enable them to do this in a secure fashion? Because also within our business, usually you have for certain clients or for certain deals also a very intimate setup, and the conversations are being done in a physical confined room amongst a small number of people. Now we have, of course, the question is like, how do we deal with video conferencing? Is that something that we can use? How do we use this? How do we introduce this in the client context and these kind of topics? So I think also here then it's important to be quick enough as a security team to respond to the needs. It's not about listing all of the challenges that you may have with it, but to see, okay, how can we enable them to conduct their business? How can we enable them to do their job so that we earn the money without creating major problems and work around it? And I think that was actually quite interesting and quite exciting, especially because it slowly started in Asia, and at one point in time you had that conversation globally in all the different markets. And we also wanted to make sure that we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we actually came up with solutions and distributed them across the business and enabled them. And I think that was quite interesting and something that you cannot really plan for, because usually the focus and shift is somewhere else. And also here, I think the conversation around it, to Jeff's earlier point about being available, talking to the people, explaining them as to what is it that we need to be careful about. And our sales staff, of course, they do care about the customers, so they do understand if we tell them client data needs to be protected. There are certain processes and measures that we need to take into account, and they appreciate that we help them in doing this, because the clients will appreciate this as well. So that's maybe some retail view and aspect on this that I wanted to add.
Yeah, I mean, some basic, things that we didn't have to think about, or that, had, let's say, historical ways of being handled, selling to customers, et cetera. I mean, now, our sales and marketing group has to sort out, we are not going to have the trade shows we used to have. How are we going to do these things now? So, while we might have video conferencing and have that, very well established for internal activity, well, how are we going to have an actual event for customers and sell to customers? As well, even, the basic things like, how do we sign documents? We used to do still a lot of paper things and a lot of manual signing of things. Now, perhaps something like e-signing of documents was a bit of a nice to have before. Now it's pretty much a basic requirement to function as a business. where, and that's a major change that we have to sort out and make sure is secure and compliant and all these kind of things.
And I do agree with both, but also when you look at it, it comes down to the data, right? There's a lot of problems out there right now that people are actually breaking compliance because the data is no longer where they're saying they're looking at the data and using the data and handling the data, right? So you have to understand your data, make sure that you control your data, and make sure that it's not actually. It is leaving your perimeter, but it's not leaving the perimeter of that laptop in some ways. We actually had to look at printing. Sorry, you can't print at home. It doesn't happen. Let's lock that down and stuff like that, because HR data can't be printed and lying around the house for medical data. So there's a bunch of other things that are complementary to security as well that are being affected here.
Christian, do you want to say anything about the how much business went online and just the impact of that for you in security?
I think in general, I mean, within our industry, there is a strong online strategy. I mean, we acquired some online distributors. I mean, for the guests here that are from Italy, I mean, we own the Yuxnet Apotheke Group to invest and strengthen our contacts there. We do have a joint venture with Alibaba for the Chinese market. So the online business is definitely very relevant and important to us. And especially, I think the pandemic is also showing this, and probably is or has convinced also the last person around that this is something we need to have a strong focus on.
Yeah, and just to jump really on that, a friend of mine who works for Chewy told him that they're doing everyday Black Friday sales right now that normally used to take a month for them to prep to, because everybody's buying their animal food through Chewy.com over here. So they're just raking it in hand over fist. So it's huge changes. I mean, and if people comes down to what you said earlier about the digital transformation, companies that had planned to do this over 2 or 3 years had to make it done in 2 or 3 weeks. And that includes security. It's not just one thing.
Exactly.
And I think this is also what we see. I mean, there's definitely when it comes to involvement and workload, I mean, it's just increasing. So for sure we cannot complain on our side in terms of lack of work in that sense, and which is good, because as we said, we're very well involved, integrated, and making sure that we're supporting the rest of the business in this path.
So before we go any further, I just want to encourage the audience to use the chat and pose any questions you'd like. Please jump in, and then we'll try to deal with them. So, guys, I think another thing that crosses my mind, and you just alluded to here in a certain sense, Christian, is what, if any, are the positives that you see coming out of the pandemic for security? 1, 2, 3, whatever. I mean, what are the things that you look at and say, this has changed, they're really in a good direction for us?
I like that question. It's like when you think about what is a crisis good for? I think I heard also over the past weeks always the reference, never waste a good crisis. I think I don't know if I would be able to say there is something that I draw from a cybersecurity perspective. I think I would answer this in a more broader way, that it probably reminded, I think, a lot of people, especially also a lot of businesses, that we need to rethink the way on how we operate and how we do the things, and how we respond to these kind of topics. And I see this more that also beyond cyber, as I said, we have a corporate security function. The corporate security function actually could show its value in terms of the crisis response around the coordination and these topics. And it might have been even so far that there was people that mentioned to us that it became much more apparent to them as to why a corporation needs a corporate security function with the different emphasis and with the different in the different areas, because they saw the value. They saw the value that we can provide, and in that sense, I think that's very positive, because it gives us a different level of visibility, and I think also a certain level of recognition for all the hard work that the team has been doing over the past week and months. Also, of course, together with the other colleagues. So, yeah, if that's something positive to take from it, then that would be it. Yes.
Jeff, Robert, what's positive?
Well, if I throw in with the never waste a good crisis, when it was quite apparent that the landscape would change, we had been already discussing and formulating around improving some defenses. And when it comes to the distributed mobile worker environment, and basically, of course, that then sort of became a bit of a no-brainer. We have to do something. The situation is changing, the landscape is changing, the risk is changing. So it let's say, put some rocket boosters on that discussion and made it quite easy. As well, I think, given that situation, given the discussions that have had to take place concerning, new tools and new environments and new ways of working, it is helping, I think, as was mentioned, to again bring back that it's very much about the security of your data, your information, and how are we going to ensure we can maintain that. So as well, I think, as Jeff mentioned, we've renewed our education awareness, because of course there was a huge push on education awareness for continuing business, continuing how are you going to work from home, all of the various issues around occupational health and safety with people working from home, and repush on IT tools and IT security and information security. So it's we started about 4 years ago really focusing on education awareness, and now this is just another if you will bump that put it back in the focus.
Do you feel like awareness has gone up a great deal?
Let's say there's a big push on awareness. I don't know if I would say that translates into, an increased awareness at the end user, but definitely they are getting more, they're getting more on their plate, more in their inbox, more on our intranet. So hopefully it's reaching them. I hope.
I think you got to see a positive light in everything. I think the thing that both Christian and Robert said, it all has validity, I think, to all of us. There's also other parts of companies out there that are cutting budgets and security teams and losing people. But I think for me, one of the main things that's coming out of this is, I'm spending more time with leadership, because, but one of the negatives that coming out is, unlike before where I could just see somebody walking down the hallway and talk to them quickly about a problem or find a problem, people are not reaching out like they used to, right? So it's this balance of two things, right? But I do see one of the main positives is a lot more awareness. The people are getting to understand it more, they're hearing more about it, they're also seeing it. So yeah, there is an awareness positivity about it, but there's also other parts that help weigh down some of this as well. But no, it's I saw a study the other day, and it was like 52% of women want to stay at home after the pandemic, and 67% of men want to stay home after the pandemic. I thought it was kind of interesting. I actually miss being with people, so I'm looking forward to going back in the office.
Office? What office?
1 second, it's right there.
Where have you been particularly challenged on the perimeter idea, guys? For instance, one thing I could think of is visibility. A lot has moved into the cloud, and visibility into the cloud has not necessarily been a strength for everybody just because of where capabilities are at. Is that true, and what are you doing about it?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we had tools in place and pretty well controlled for again what was inside the network, if you will, and the IT teams had some tools deployed to the mobiles, but found some challenges and issues we were not aware of when all of a sudden, we wanted to revalidate that we had the right visibility and controls with the new landscape, and found out, well, we didn't actually have the visibility we thought we did. So, we have had various tools to try and manage the risk of information flowing into, unapproved cloud solutions, et cetera. And like I said earlier on, everyone just is trying to get their job done. And usually they don't intend to do the wrong thing. They just, I'm just trying to get the job done and keep the business running. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're in the cloud, we've been in the cloud for a while. It's all about getting high fidelity detection, knowing that if something happens, it's happened. We're spending a lot more time trying to make sure those are what we're doing. The cloud, like you said, is for a lot of people out there new because they had to move to it. I think visibility outside of your organization gets harder when you don't understand it or haven't worked a lot in it. So I think people are now getting to grips with the outside world, the clouds, the different aspects of SaaS and platform as a service and infrastructure as a service. And you're going to see a bit of an uptake, a lot more around tooling and reporting around it. And, I've been lucky that, we already had a huge cloud presence. So we weren't so bad, but I've got a lot of peers that I've, been helping and giving them some direction around it, because it is a sore point for a lot of people that had no thing. And the digital transformation was rapidly go to the cloud. It wasn't go to the cloud and make sure you had the right tools to manage, monitor, and protect.
I think the only thing I would add is that when you, especially in the context of the crisis, I mean, if you have to do changes and if you have to look into this, that you make sure that you do this jointly together and not dropping anything on the way, because then all the speed is not helping you, because a couple of hours or later you have to deal with a different challenge. And I think that's definitely key, and that's also what we try to do and what we achieved in our case for those small changes that needed to be done on a short notice to incorporate the right level of controls to the extent that we feel comfortable. And to answer I think that the wider question around the cloud, I think that's also beyond the pandemic and beyond the crisis, the current topic, to make sure, okay, how do we maintain the right level of visibility to be able to do our job well? Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, and unless somebody jumps in with a question here, I'm going to ask you guys one last question. We talked a lot about the importance of awareness and education, because human behavior in the end is so central to good security. If you could, as CISOs, dictate one behavioral change to everyone, what would it be? Imagine for a moment that you had the power to change one thing. What would it be?
I would never change anything, because if you change things, then something else goes wrong. But I mean, it's all about awareness and giving people the right tools to do the right job, and telling them how to use it properly. People will always find ways around things. There's no such thing as perfect DLP. But if I was going to ask for one thing, every time you get an email, always just second guess it.
Yeah, so Jeff, sorry, if you had if you're Thanos and you can snap your fingers and just make it happen, if I could do that, I think it would be understanding. If people could get the understanding, if they understood the risk and the issues, then I don't think there would be, compliance issues. I don't think there would be as big a difficulty as we have. But everyone is really challenged to get their job done in the new environment, in the new working from home and everything else. And, getting people's attention to then consume the education and to really understand the issues is very tough. So yeah, if I could just make them understand, that'd be great.
I had to laugh because I thought of the whole Thanos thing, and I thought, well, if you clicked your fingers, we'd have half the problem.
Good movie
on your front, Jeff, on your example, and awareness ties into this as well. I was driving into Milan 2 days ago and suddenly got an email that looked for all the world like it came from one of the leadership of Bocconi University and asking me to do something, to help on something. And I thought for a second, I said, it's a little bit unusual wording and maybe not quite in the normal style of this person, but maybe they're in a hurry. So I responded, got another email back, and said, well, I'll be available. I'll be there in a bit if there's something you really need me to do. And then got an email back that just made me say, there's no possible way this would come from this person, as I was growing more and more suspicious. So I stopped and parked and checked what the email address behind the headline was. And it, of course, wasn't from Bocconi at all. So I immediately called the person's executive assistant and said, time out, you should be aware of this. And it turned out that a day later, we found out I wasn't the only one who at Bocconi who that was happening to from this same fake email. But Christian, I cut off when you were going to give your answer to this. If you could snap your fingers and make one change.
I actually like the answer of Jeff not to change anything, because that keeps it interesting. So I think I don't know if there's really something where I said, okay, you could snap the finger. I think I like for those ones of when you read the famous book of Douglas Adams, don't panic. I think that's something that I would like to ingrain into the people. To apply a calm mindset when it comes to all of the topics, because it solves a lot. Calm means reaching out to us when they see that something goes wrong, and not just secretly disappear and leave the scenes, but also calmly looking on the emails and topics like this. I think that's maybe something that I would like to see to get. Relaxed and at ease with using all of this, and don't panic and take it easy. I think that's about it. And for the rest, no excitement if everything if everything is fixed. So I'm sorry. I'll like that.
Christian,
part.
other
I will not change
words
it.
of Dirk Gently, which was another character from Douglas Adams, was everything's connected.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and the conversation this evening. Jeff, Robert, Christian, grazie mille. And stay safe and talk soon. Thank you very much.
Guys,
Thanks a lot,
Thank you.
guys.
See you guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.